Hey everyone, thank you so much for tuning in again with me here as we continue on with understanding the 12 steps. In this episode, we are talking about step 3. Now, step 3 is an interesting step because, see, it's a step where you actually have to move forward and do something. And what is that? Is you have to make a decision. Now, this step says that we made a decision to turn your will and your lives over to the care of God. Now, the terminology that is used in this step is we. So it is we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God. But the idea of this, the essence of this, is that you make a decision to turn your will and your life over to the care of God. Now, what does this step entail? Number one, it entails trust. You have to, first, in step 2, you come to believe. But then what do you do with that belief? Well, that is step 3, is now you have to come to a place of trusting the God that it is that you have come to believe in. And so now you're going to turn something over to him. And what is that? Your will and your life. This is more of an action step that entails trust. Now, so oftentimes what happens is you've been relying upon self-will. You've been running on your own wisdom, on your own decision-making process, doing what you thought was right in your own eyes. And now it's time to do something different. And what is that? Is you're going to turn your will and your life over to the care of God. Now, the interesting thing about this step is it can't be half-hearted. You can't turn your part of your will and part of your life over to the care of God and think that you're going to get the full benefit out of it. In order to receive the full benefit, you have to give him everything. And so when it says you turn your will, that's your entire will. When it says you turn your life, you made a decision to turn your life, what you're doing is you're turning your entire life over to the care of God. In John 15:5, it says, I am the vine, you are the branches. He who abides in me, and I in him, bears much fruit, but apart from me, you can do nothing. See, this step is about coming to the realization that apart from Jesus, you can't do anything. It is that humility step that says that I can't, he can, and now you're going to let him, right? First step, I can't. Second step, he can. Third step, where you're at right now, is now you're going to let him. How? You're going to turn your care of your will and your life over to the care of him. See, this is a step that determines just how ready and willing you are to do something different. It's one thing to say that you're powerless. It's another thing to say that you've come to believe. But now it's absolutely, this is where it kind of like separates the men from the boys. This is where you pull up your bootstraps and you say, okay, God, I'm going to give it all to you. See, God cannot begin to do a good work within inside of you until you are ready to give it to him. Now, he will cause all things to work together for good, but you have to turn your will and your life over to him, right? And so this is that ready step, that step that says you're ready to do things God's way and not your own. In Romans 12:1, it says, therefore I urge you, brothers, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual act of worship. See, there's a physical act of worship that then you sing songs, you raise your hands, your vocal cords are going. All these things are happening as you're giving him your physical aspect of worship. And there might even be a time where you mentally and emotionally feel something, where you get those little tingles in your body, right? But there's a spiritual act of worship. And this step is that spiritual act of worship that says you're giving him everything. You're giving him all things. Now, this step isn't just a one-time step. It's not like you make this decision and it's a one and done. It's a continuous thing that even sometimes throughout the day, you have to turn your will and your life over to him multiple times throughout the day. So when you wake up, turn your will and your life over to the care of God. Maybe when you get in your car, before you start to drive, turn your will in your life over to the care of God. As you're driving, somebody upsets you, somebody irritates you, you get frustrated, your anxiety starts to build. Stop, make a decision, turn your will and your life over to the care of God. You get to work, things don't go the way you want them to go. Your boss irritates you, says something to you. Your coworker doesn't do what they're supposed to do. Maybe a customer yells at you. You have to stop, take that breath, and make a decision to turn your will and your life over to the care of God. Now, does it mean that you let people run over you? No, but so oftentimes, and I know this is true of me and I believe it's true of you, is you get into a reactionary state. When something doesn't go your way, it's instantaneous reaction mode. And typically when you go into reaction mode, you go into self-will mode. And when you're in self-will mode, then God doesn't have the wheel. God doesn't have charge. You've just taken it back. So multiple times, maybe your significant other, your husband or your wife, says something, doesn't do something, doesn't say something. You have to make a decision to turn your will and your life over to the care of God. When things don't go your way, when they don't happen the way that you think they should or as quickly as you think they should, whatever is going on in your life, whether it has to do with finances, has to do with relationships, has to do with job, has to do with housing, has to do with kids, whatever it has to do with, maybe even just has to do with your own feelings, your own thinking. One of the cliches is an addict alone is in bad company. I'd like to take that a step further and say, how about just a human being alone is in bad company? See, because your thinking takes you to places that you may not necessarily desire to go. And as a result, then, there's consequences. And some consequences are greater than others. But when you have the wheel and you are driving, you have the wheel, you're driving the car, you are determining your steps, you're determining your outcomes, you're doing things your own way, the way you want them to be done. That does not lead to a happiness, an inner joy. What that leads to is frustration. What that leads to is unmet expectations. What that leads to is a life running on self-will and not God's will. So when you work step 3, it's about turning it over and giving it to Him. And yes, it's about making a decision, but a decision that is not followed up with action is just an empty decision. A decision has to be followed up with action. So when you make that decision, it means you actually have to give it to Him. I can't decide I'm going to go to a restaurant and then never go. I can't decide I'm going to go to, say, a support group or a meeting or see my counselor and then not go. You can't make a decision and then not go and then expect to reap the benefits as if you had. When you make that decision, it is with the expectation that you are going to actually then step out in faith and you're going to do it. So step 3 is about making the decision and doing it, right? And so when you work step 3, it works in conjunction with steps 1 and 2. 1 is you're at the end of the ropes. You've pretty much exhausted all avenues you possibly can and you're ready to do something different. The second step is about saying, now that I want to do something different, now that you want to do something different, you have to go to the source of who can help you do that. But you have to believe that it's going to work. You have to believe that the source is going to work. That source is God through Jesus Christ. You've worked the second step. Once you have that belief, now you are here at the third step. This is the cusp where now it is, you want God to be enacted into your life, into your very being, where life around you can be falling apart, but the life within you can be at peace. That's the kind of life that God desires for you to have, is a peaceful life spent with Him, that even when life around you is falling apart, life within you is peaceful, it is stable, because you know who is living within you. Scripture says that greater is He who lives in you, lives in me, than he who lives in the world. When you rely upon the outside to satisfy the inside, you will always be left wanting. But when you seek God, and He's on the inside of you, you will find contentment. And in that contentment, even in the most challenging, stressful, uncertain of times, because you've made that decision, because you continue to make that decision, because you are operating on God's will and not self-will, you can trust that not only is He going to work within you, but He is going to work all things out together for good. Because as Paul wrote in Romans, all things work together for good to those who've been called, who love God and who've been called according to His purpose, right? And so when you have Him living within you, He will work it out. And even when you veer off course, and then you again get back, do that adjustment, work step 3, make that decision, turn your will, your life over to Him, He's going to work it out for good, and you're going to ultimately be able to take a look back, and you're going to be able to see how God was working within you. And then you're going to be able to see the gratitude in it. You're going to be able to see the blessings in the journey. You're going to be able to see the blessing even in the pain, the blessing in the discomfort, the blessing in the uncertainty, because you made that decision to give it to Him. So oftentimes you seek to try to fix things on your own. Have you ever tried to just fix things on your own only to discover you've made them worse? The idea is God can make all things better, and He will make them better to the degree that you and I can never possibly achieve or reach on our own. You can't achieve the better that He can reach within you, but you have to come to a place of letting him work within you. And so that is what the third step is about, is giving it to God, trusting God, and making that decision. This is a trust step. It is an action step where you don't remain complacent. You make that decision, and then you do it. You give him your will, you give him your life, and you let him begin to work within you in such a way that you grow, that you develop. You grow closer to him. You become more gracious to others. And how about this? You actually become more gracious towards yourself. Your own worst enemy is yourself. And getting back to the idea of a person alone is in bad company, I get it. I believe you get it too. The voices in your head and the things that those old tapes that continue to haunt you, continue to follow you, continue to not want to let go. When God is living within you and you're turning your will over to him, he's going to hit the stop button. And he's not just going to hit the rewind. He's going to take the tape out. He's going to put a new one in. He's going to give you a new heart. He's going to give you a new mind, and he's going to transform you from the inside out. But that's a process. And in that process, you're going to grow beyond what you could ever possibly imagine, and willing to step out and then move into the next portion of the steps, which is step 4. And I guarantee you, you are not going to be able to, and nor are you going to want to step into step 4 without having a firm grasp of making that decision and having the God, the Creator, through having Jesus Christ living within you. You must have him in order to get the fullness out of what step 4 has for you. You're not going to be able to do that alone. So step 3 is critical, and it is crucial in order to be able to even begin to take that next step forward. But I want to thank you for joining with me here today. Next week, we're going to dive into step 4. But if you haven't already, go ahead, hit the subscribe button below. We'd love to have you follow us along on our YouTube channel. Also would love to have you make a comment, hit that thumbs up button. And if you haven't already taken a listen to understanding step 1 or step 2, I'd like to encourage you to go back, take a listen to those. See, because step 1, 2, and 3 all pretty much kind of go together. And there's no way you can move into 4, let alone 5 or 6, if you don't have a firm foundation, a firm grasp on steps 1, 2, and 3. This is about not having any reservations. It's letting it all go, giving it all up to him so that you can move forward. But I hope you have the most amazing day ever. And may the God, the Creator, may Jesus Christ, his Son, bless you abundantly. God bless. Have a great day.